This morning in Health Watch, dealing with stalkers. It's not a problem only for celebrities. The Justice Department estimates that 3.4 million Americans a year are victimized. About 75% know their stalker. 1/3 say they were followed or spied on, and 21% say they've been attacked. We're joined by Michelle Archer, a director at Safe Horizon here in New York and a stalking survivor. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's go through the 4 steps you say that people should go through to protect themselves and their families.
Sure.
Step number 1, reach out for help. How and to who?
I think anybody that the victim can talk to. I think one of the challenges with stalking is that the victim tends to isolate themselves. And I think it's so important for safety. Talk to family, talk to friends, talk to your neighbors, call a hotline, victim service advocate, and get resources, get support so that you're not dealing with this alone.
And then everyone can keep their eye on you, be aware.
Exactly,
right?
Right.
The next step you say, vary your routine. Give me a good example.
Break up your routine during the day. Maybe change the way that you go to work. Change the time that you go to work, go to school. It makes it harder for the stalker to have access to you, and that little act can actually increase your safety.
Okay, step number 3, create a stalking log. What's that, and what do you recommend?
Absolutely. I think it's really important for victims of stalking to document everything, and that's really what we're talking about when we say stalking log. So you want to just simply, in a notebook, write down the date, time, location, brief description of what happened. Start with the most recent event, work your way backwards, and save any evidence and document any witnesses to any of the incidents that happen.
And then what do you do with that log?
You want to keep it, and then that's going to lead you to the next step, which is
go to police.
Right.
Just walk into a police station with that log and say,
sure.
Say what?
You can walk into the police station, let them know who you're concerned about, what's been going on. The log's going to help you with that because there's probably going to be a lot of incidents. It may be difficult to remember everything. And also it's important to have evidence of the stalking behavior. So that log is really going to help that process.
Should you ever confront your stalker?
Absolutely not. It's really not a good idea. I think a better option is to go to law enforcement and get help from them. I don't think it's a good idea to ever confront your stalker. It could escalate the situation.
Is there anything someone can do to prevent being stalked?
Well, I think that's, a very good question. I think that's a very challenging answer. But I do think if something's going on, if somebody has concerns, that they should really reach out for help. I think that's the more important thing.
In the final seconds, your story, you were stalked for how long?
I was stalked for about 2 years by an ex-boyfriend.
And you did all these things?
Yes, I did. And they really did help. They really did help. I think the documentation was one of the most important things that I did.
Michelle Archer.
A possible tsunami was the immediate threat here in BC. Now there is the risk of radioactive fallout. 2 nuclear power plants in Japan are damaged. And as Bell Piri reports, that's cause for alarm here.
Japan has declared a state of emergency at 2 nuclear power plants. 5 reactors have been shut down because of cooling problems due to power outages after the earthquake. Radioactive vapor has been released from at least one of them to protect the reactor. The question is, where will the vapor go?
We tend to see weather systems coming up and over via so the Aleutian Panhandle or down through Hawaii and up and in.
In the long term, it'll come to us. The danger depends on what happens in Japan. If the cooling systems aren't repaired within 24 hours, a core meltdown is a risk. The worst case is a Chernobyl scenario with explosions destroying the reactors and sending a deadly plume of radioactivity into the air. Nuclear experts say venting radioactive steam into the atmosphere to alleviate pressure in the reactors is bad for the population generally. The winds right now, for the short term, are good for the Japanese.
If a concentrated plume of this so-called dilute radioactive steam comes their way, enters under their door sills, under their window sills, and they breathe it in, they are getting a dose of radioactivity.
Experts say taking the lid off a reactor is much like taking the lid off a pot of boiling water. You can't control what's going to happen. And in the case of the reactors, no one can say how long the steam will vent, how high it will vent, and how far it will.
This isn't stalking done by a former spouse or former boyfriend or someone that that's just grumbled at you, but stalking that's being done by total strangers in an organ. What I've wrote about is an isolated story here in San Antonio.
Dr. Hall says it is a story about himself and the harassment and rapes his ex-girlfriends allegedly suffered beginning in 1996. Dr. Hall believes the people behind it are well-organized operatives using government satellite technology to terrorize him and other victims.
All voicing the same complaints: organized stalking, weird electronic disturbances going on in their homes. Most of the women are complaining of drugging and sexual assault. So it gets sent to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrists don't look into the technology. They don't do any research into whether or not any of this is possible.
With his book published, Dr. Hall is taking his message in his own radio program in the works.
There have been several people in my midst, obviously, that have been victimized, but if you look at it on a larger scale, it is an actual problem as well.
Your body would be telling you it's time to go somewhere else because this place doesn't feel good. Now, this morning, when we turned the system back on again and make another analysis, that wave is gone. So either the satellite that they had in position to expose us to this has moved, or they decided that they just wanted to give us a one solid day dose of it. It did shut down last night just before the banquet, and so we had a good solid 8-10 hours of exposure to this thing. Now, I don't know how many people have been here both days that noticed that today they're feeling a whole lot better than they did yesterday. And I've talked to quite a few people and asked them whether they feel better and whether they felt anything yesterday. And there's been quite a few people that have said that they're feeling a whole lot better today than yesterday. How many people feel better today than yesterday? Quite a few? Yeah, see? So this stuff is the real deal, and the interesting thing about a convention like this is that
How to protect yourself from a stalker. Stay one step ahead of your stalker with these safety precautions. You will need a police report, a stalking record, evidence of stalking, a post office box, and fraud alerts. Optional, an address confidentiality program. Step 1. Ask your local police if the harassment meets the legal definition of stalking, which varies from state to state. If it does, file a police report so the stalking is on record. In any event, keep records of the harassment and save all evidence of it. Step 2. If the stalker is threatening to harm you or has tried to, weigh the pros and cons of getting an order of protection. Most stalkers violate them, but if they do, it will give police a reason to arrest them. Taking out an order of protection may provoke your stalker to more aggressive behavior, so have a safety plan in place before you get one. Step 3. Ignore your stalker. If they call, hang up, or set the phone down and let them talk until they hang up. Do not answer their emails, texts, or letters. Do not try to reason with them. Assume that any attention you give them will encourage them, and the more you engage with a stalker, the more they'll stalk you. Step 4. Get a post office box for your mail. If you move, don't file a change of address with the post office. Tell loved ones directly. If your state has an address confidentiality program, join it. It allows stalking victims to set up a fictitious address to prevent a stalker from gaining access to their address via public records. Step 5. Put a fraud alert on your credit reports by contacting the fraud department of each of the 3 main credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. This will help prevent your stalker from harassing you via identity theft because you'll be asked to verify any attempt to take out credit in your name. Step 6. Tell everyone in your life, friends, relatives, neighbors, and co-workers that you are being stalked so they are not tricked into divulging information about you. Step 7. For more information, contact the Stalking Resource Center at 1-800-FYI-CALL or check out their website at ncvc.org/src. Did you know? Men are more likely to stalk their exes, while women tend to stalk acquaintances with whom they'd like to have a relationship.
The public face of the U.S. State Department has resigned after criticising the treatment of an American soldier accused of handing over secret cables to WikiLeaks. Spokesman P.J. Crowley told a university audience that holding Private Bradley Manning in maximum security was, quote, counterproductive and stupid. He offered his resignation after the remarks became public. President Barack Obama later insisted Private Manning was being treated appropriately. Human rights groups have expressed concern over the Marine, who's in solitary confinement and shackled at all times.
I became interested in the Space Preservation Act and in developing the Space Preservation Act when I learned that our administration in Washington was looking at a program called Vision 2020. And Vision 2020 actually is a program for the United States to dominate the world from outer space. Now, I love America, and I'd like to say that we're number one. But let me tell you something. We don't need to be number one in weapons of space. The Department of Defense has been working at a facility in Alaska, which is doing research into effects of electromagnetic frequencies in the ionosphere. And that facility, which is called HAARP, has raised concern among many individuals about how this research would be applied. For example, we know that, according to some of the research, as these energy pulses are directed into the ionosphere, they can have somewhat of an
Tonight we bring you a special report on a problem experts call a disturbing epidemic.
Many people think bullying only happens on the playground, but an alarming number of adults are being tormented at work. Kendra Slogoski has more on boardroom bullies.
Some of the things that have happened, I would never treat other people that way. I feel like I have to be watching behind my back and always walking on a fine line.
For Charlene, her office is like a war zone. From 9 to 5, she is wounded by words and isolation. She is the victim of a bully.
Shame, because you feel like you must have done something to be the target.
Charlene is not her real name. Her identity is being protected because she still faces the bully and the torment every day.
Well, it can be like a long, dark tunnel, you know. For a while it was, because you don't see any way out.
Charlene is not alone. Workplace bullying is so prevalent, 1 in 6 people are victims. 80% of all bullies are somebody's boss.
That's epidemic rate. It's epidemic rate, but it's not a discussable everywhere because so much emotion is tied to bullying. We spend a lot of time in our workplaces defending bullies.
Dr. Gary Namey heads up the Workplace Bullying Institute in the United States. He travels around North America to get his message out and advocates for bullying laws. He tells his audience most employers defend bullies.
See, he's never put it together that for a decade, Bob's lips have been affixed to his little butt.
What really cements bullying as part of the legacy in a company is the employer's response to it when it's reported. And if they say, no, that's unacceptable, that doesn't happen here, it's stopped. It's nipped in the bud, and it never becomes part of history. Unfortunately, those companies rarely exist.
Dr. Namey says most employers don't know how to manage a bully, but doing nothing breeds acceptance. Namey says bullying is a form of violence, a health hazard. The victims often develop anxiety, sleep deprivation, a whole list of medical problems. That's why he says employers must create a policy and enforce it.
You go after bullying, not the bullies.
Making it easier for victims like Charlene to come forward, stripping away the fear so others don't just stand by and watch.
If I had somebody who would go to bat with me, that would maybe be different, but I don't know. I can't guarantee that anybody would say anything.
Kendra Slogoski, Global News.
Dr. Gary Namey says developing a workplace bullying policy will not only protect the health of workers, but also the bottom line. Namey says bullies are expensive to a company because they run up costs in turnover, employee sick days, and short-term disability claims. In fact, a Canadian company calculated the cost of one bully for 1 year was $500,000. Quebec is the only province that has specific bullying legislation.